Commissioner, how many staff are going to be in these units? And you talked about reprioritising and moving people. So what crimes are less important that you're taking staff from them?
The announcement today is the start of an engagement process with teams and districts, so I'm not going to go into fine detail on this, but this will be a mix of reprioritisation and potentially new investment, subject to budget decisions.
So what percentage reprioritisation? And what?
I suspect we'll end up with about a 50-50 mix across this whole model, but we need to see where those conversations get to. We will be looking particularly at how our intelligence is focused to ensure that we're able to collect the right information we need on gangs locally. And we have a range of groups working across different investigative, prevention, response priorities that we will be able to consider for contribution in a very focused way on gangs.
If you're taking 50% of these staff from other operations, are they doing work that's not important at the moment?
There's always opportunity to reprioritise, and we've been very clear about the need for us to refocus onto core policing priorities. Police has become very spread across a wide range of prevention functions. Some of those functions can properly be argued are not the domain of police to deal with, so we will be looking...
So you're doing stuff at the moment that's wasting your time?
Not wasting our time, but that can fairly be said to be the role of other agencies.
Is that like mental health call-outs?
That's one of the areas that we've called out where we are responding significantly to crises that don't require a police intervention.
Commissioner, can you explain to me how this gang unit would have prevented the fatal shooting on Ponsonby Road?
One of the opportunities that sits in front of us with new powers coming through is to have a much stronger focus on gangs and the harm they cause. Gangs are an entity or entities that give rise to all sorts of harm. They do that because of the business they do that because of the way they intimidate people in communities. And the momentum that sits around gangs is all tied up in that identity and their presence in communities. So when we are able to get a better handle on the gang landscape and police that using new tools, then we will see an overall reduction in that harm.
He was unpatched, he had a concealed weapon in a bag. What about this unit in any way would stop that incident happening again?
We know that gangs are linked to 8% of violence, to 18% of serious violence. And so a very high proportion of the harm that's done in communities happens because we have a group of people who are associating in a particular way, who are promoting offending in a particular way, who, because they are patched, intimidate members of the public. It stops witnesses coming forward.
Okay, so if there's about 9,000 gang members at the moment, what's your target? This unit is going to reduce gang membership by how many?
Okay, we will know we've been successful when we see reduced gang visibility in communities. And when we see
what are your measurable targets, Commissioner?
When we see a reduction in harm from gangs, so that those you have in the pack we've provided to you, some numbers that show the immense contribution that gangs make to harm in our communities. We would want to see all of that go on. I'm not going to say to you, I'm after exactly this number, because we will know we've made a difference when we feel it in our communities.
So what are your measurable targets for this unit? Can you just give me your top two?
We have not set targets for this unit, except for effective implementation of this gang legislation.
So how do we know it's worked?
We will know it's worked when we see a reduction in harm from gangs in our communities. We can measure that. We can measure the extent to which gangs are involved in various crime types. We've given you the data for that. When we see all of those numbers go down, we know we're on the right track. This is not an overnight fix, but this is an area of focus for us, and we will make gains.
On the tangi yesterday, there were hundreds of people wearing patches there. You have said you might not intervene in the moment, but you will follow up. And you said search warrants. You'll go to the house and take their patches. So, in that case, how many patches do you reckon were there yesterday?
Look, I have...
Hundreds, you would accept? Hundreds?
There are certainly hundreds of people.
Okay, let's say 300, just roughly. So, will you get a search warrant for every single person who was wearing a patch, go to 300 houses and get 300 patches? Is that your plan?
We will enforce this new law.
So that is your plan. Is a scenario, that's a working scenario.
We certainly will be seeking search warrants in that kind of situation. And what we've seen, if you've followed the legislation around gang conflict, it's been hugely effective because as soon as we get the opportunity to go and intervene in that way in somebody's home, we find guns, we find drugs, we find other evidence of criminal offending. And so if people choose to breach this ban, they will open themselves up to police intervention in a way that will lead to a whole range of other issues for them.
So that is the commitment that you give to the New Zealand public today, that you will go and get every one of those patches that you saw yesterday.
Look, I'm not saying for all situations exactly what will happen, but what I'm saying is, as a general principle, if people breach this legislation, they can expect police to follow up, and we will use the tools available.
So you want every one of those patches collected the next day? You want every one of those patches collected?
My expectation is if there's 300 gang members with 300 patches and the police tell them to remove those patches and they refuse to do it, then the police will have follow-up action and they will take those patches. And it'll mean searching their homes. And by the way, the police have got a deep capability that everyone seems to be ignoring, and they've already shown that in the last 6 months in the way that they've been policing these gang convoys, where they've been putting checkpoints in place, they've had the resources there, they've been using Eagle, they've been arresting people on warrants.
So if they have a deep capability, Minister, why do they need to call it something else, like a national gang unit and district units? Why can't you do all of this as you were doing it now?
Well, again, that's an operational question for the Commissioner, but what he's doing is he's responding to the incoming government's expectations around putting public safety and victims at the heart of our criminal justice system, and putting pressure and suppressing and disrupting and creating as much disruption as we can to these organised criminal groups. We want to inflict maximum damage to them, and we want them to say in New Zealand it is just too hard to peddle drugs, perpetrate violence, and be a member of a gang.